Good afternoon, everyone, and happy 2025. Thank you for joining the Noontime Knowledge Series for Penn State fundraising volunteers, presidential counselors, and donors. I'm Susan Cookich, Director of Development and Alumni Relations for the Ross and Carol Nease College of Nursing. I'm delighted to be here today hosting this conversation on a unique and powerfully impactful initiative that has its home here at Penn State, the safety system. Since 2018, the safety system has provided essential expert care for survivors of sexual assault and intimate partner violence. The system utilizes telehealth technologies to connect nurses who are credentialed as sexual assault nurse examiners with on-site clinicians in locations lacking specialty care, such as rural and underserved communities, with the aim of providing support for local providers who may then deliver person-centered, trauma-informed expert care to survivors, promoting recovery, health, and justice. Leveraging the expertise within the university community to bring healthcare to the most underserved populations in our state is a core pillar of Penn State's land-grant mission. The safety system has made an incredible impact on the goals of this pillar, connecting those who have been through deeply traumatic experiences of assault and violence with the professional care and guidance needed to begin to heal and thrive. I am very proud to introduce today's speaker, Dr. Sheridan Miyamoto, who is the Director and Principal Investigator of the Safety System, and who joined Penn State's Ross and Carol Nease College of Nursing as an Associate Professor in 2015. Sheridan earned a bachelor's degree in psychology from the University of California, Davis, a master's degree from the Family Nurse Practitioner program at Vanderbilt University, and a doctorate in nursing science and healthcare leadership from the University of California, Davis. Prior to earning her PhD in 2014, Sheridan spent nearly 15 years as a family nurse practitioner at the University of California, Davis's Child and Adolescent Abuse, Resource, and Evaluation Center. In total, Sheridan has more than 2 decades of experience in the development and dissemination of telehealth services. She pioneered the conceptualization, implementation, and evaluation of the safety system, specifically to address the lack of specialty care for survivors of sexual assault and intimate partner violence. I am certain that you will see the depth and breadth of the impact and potential of the safety system during her presentation today. Once the presentation has concluded, we'll open the floor for questions. Audience members, please feel free to enter any questions you might have in the chat box as they arrive during the presentation, or you may simply raise your hand during the question and answer period. With that, it's my pleasure to turn things over to Dr. Sheridan Miyamoto.
Thank you so much, Susan. I am so heartened by the fact that you are all here to listen and learn a little bit about the work that we're doing. And I'm really excited to share a little bit about what we've been doing over the last 9 years at Penn State. So I am going to share my screen. Give me just a moment, and this will give you a little visual. I promise I won't show you anything that you don't want to see, but I want you to see some of the technology and the things that we've developed, and I think it'll give you some better understanding of what we do and how we partner across health systems in Pennsylvania. So let me share this. Give me just a moment. Okay. All right, so I want to introduce you to the Sexual Assault Forensic Examination Telehealth System. Our goal is really to provide compassionate trauma care for individuals no matter where they live. So sexual violence is a pervasive global health threat. Over 50% of women, 30% of men, and a disproportionate number of individuals and far too many children will experience sexual violence. Survivors often face stigma and harmful responses that prevent them from seeking help. And despite efforts over the past 30 years, we haven't really made meaningful progress in helping people to heal from this trauma. The long-term impacts of untreated or poorly treated sexual assault are profound. Sexual assault survivors experience higher rates of post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety, suicide attempts, chronic disease, and even premature death. So pervasive sexual assault that impacts, at some level, nearly half of the female population and a more significant number of men than you might recognize may be one of the greatest determinants of poor future health outcomes. Sexual assault nurse examiners, or what we call SANEs, are the ideal response when a victim comes forward for care. Research shows that physical, mental health, and judicial outcomes are all better for victims of a sexual assault when cared for by SANE nurses versus untrained emergency department providers. In the majority of US hospitals, providers without any training perform these examinations, opening a sexual assault kit and reading instructions in front of a patient, failing to deliver the trauma-informed care that we know promotes healing. One of my grad students and I conducted a study and found that 75% of Pennsylvania hospitals do not have a comprehensive SANE trained response. And this is true in Pennsylvania. It's not different in other states, but we have a really large rural population, and it's really difficult for rural communities to attract and retain experts in this area. We also have a national shortage of expertise in this area. One statistic that the Government Accountability Organization put out was that 2 years after SANE nurses receive training, only 7% are still doing the work. So this can be a real area of, it's a challenging area of practice, and nurses need a lot of support to stay in the work. So I'm going to talk about that statistic again later. I'll share with you what our statistics look like when safety is involved. But all of these things together result in really substantial disparities in the quality of care that somebody might get based on where they live. So I'm going to introduce you to the safety system. I'll tell you a little bit about how we work, and then I'll get to what our outcomes look like. We do a lot of evaluation and research on our model. We've been at this work now for 8 years, so we have some really important outcomes to share as well. So our mission is to partner with underserved communities to enhance compassionate, high-quality sexual abuse care that we believe will help people on a path of healing and justice. So to date, sexual assault has really been prioritized as a crime to prosecute instead of the major threat to health that it is. So in our current criminal justice focused model, which is important, the goal though becomes to build a legal case. The survivor becomes a victim, is told where to go, what to do. Her truthfulness and actions may be scrutinized, and she can endure repetitive and invasive interviews. And for every 1,000 reports of sexual assault, less than 0.5% of those result in a perpetrator being convicted. So what we see as the safety center way is a better alternative to a criminal justice focus. And that's where we've put our energy and work in the last 8 years. So in this trauma-informed healthcare model, patients are believed and respected. They're given options and choices when they come in for care at the hospital, and they're empowered as they make those decisions based on their most pressing needs. And this is how people regain control and begin to heal from trauma. We also know that if we do this trauma-informed part well, then survivors are much more likely to be able to see a justice outcome through. So we might see prosecutions and successful prosecution and holding people accountable. We may see a shift in that as well when people are empowered and well cared for in that initial moment. So this is just gives you a sense, it's maybe a little bit overwhelming, I'll talk through it, of what we do as far as a telehealth solution. So we've established the problem that there are sexual assault is a large problem. We have very few people who are trained to do the work. And what we have chosen to do is to leverage technology and harness that technology to bring specialists wherever they're needed. Because This is an emergency that someone has experienced, right? Maybe one of the worst things that we can imagine that you would walk into an emergency department seeking care for. And it's really critical that they're met with somebody who understands the dynamics and who has trauma-informed skills and training and knows how to both collect forensic evidence and support them in that moment. So what we do is we partner with community hospitals that may not have a response or may not have a complete response. We will provide training to a group of nurses that are coming forward saying, I could potentially be this response for my community. We provide 24/7, or we provide regular 40-hour training. They often come to Penn State and get 2 days skills training. And then they get our telehealth equipment, the safety system. So this is a device that we have created here at Penn State. It's a iPad, so you can show up, and the Telesane supports both the local nurse and the patient in real time throughout the exam. And the two nurses partner together to deliver the very best possible care that we can. When we go to do the forensic exam, so just for those who may not know, a forensic exam might take anywhere from 3 to 5 hours. That's not all active time doing the examination, but talking with the patient, etc. But we also need to really examine very carefully for injury. What we've created here is a way for the Telesane, who is here working from a secure location, to see exactly what the local nurse is seeing on this screen in real time at the exact same time, so that we can say, if I was working with someone in a rural community, I would be reflecting on exactly what they're seeing. And we have an opportunity to say, what do you see at 3 o'clock? Or I see a fiber or a hair there. And that might be an opportunity for me to encourage her to collect that evidence. And we would talk through how to do that in the right way. So we are really a live partner in every aspect of the examination, making sure that best policies and protocols and national standards are being followed, and that we have an eye on that patient to assure that they understand what we're doing. They're getting their questions answered. They're feeling believed and supported throughout the entire process. So we do all of those things. I have a team of almost 20 expert forensic nurses that work across the country on call. And when we are paged from any of our partner hospitals, they respond and respond within the first 5 minutes, and they're on and conducting an exam with them as soon as that patient is ready. So this gives you a sense of what some of the components to our training are. As I said, we do comprehensive sexual assault nurse examiner training, and then our local partner nurses come to University Park, and they get 2 days of hands-on skills training with our Telesanes and with standardized patients. So they get an opportunity to conduct this in a safe environment and to learn how they're going to partner with the Telesane, who will be supporting them in real time. After they finish their training, and from that very moment on, we deliver the telehealth system to the local hospital so that for every person that comes forward seeking care, they have access to telehealth. So we provide that 24/7 live exam Telesane consultation and mentoring. We often do quality assurance after the fact, and we provide feedback and ongoing education for our partner nurses. We also do a lot of community engagement. It's a really critical piece for us. We go to every site as we launch a new site and ask them to invite community members who care about this issue. So that might be law enforcement, district attorneys, advocates, child protective services, legislators, because we really want to celebrate hospitals that step forward and access these resources to make sure that if somebody is harmed in their community, that they can get care. We worked with a really wonderful hospital administrator who, as I was talking with him about what the value might be of this program, he said, we are a critical access hospital, meaning that there's no other hospital, within an hour drive. And he said, we are not expected to do open heart surgery here, but we absolutely should be able to care for somebody who has been harmed in our community. So we also invite the media, and our focus at these events is, one, to have conversation with everyone in the community so that we are adding value to the strengths they already have and hopefully filling in some of the gaps that they've identified. But we also want the nurses who have come forward to be exalted for being the solution in their community. And we think that that has a real key component to their staying retained in that job. So I'll get to some of those statistics as well. So we have a good number of sites in Pennsylvania. We've kind of, doubled our size each year, it seems. And what's important about this slide is that where our focus was originally on rural and underserved communities, as you can see over here in these urban communities, there is a similar problem there. We are in a number of level 1 trauma centers that really struggled to keep an expert team together, to have the resources to make sure that they stayed engaged and could work successfully on that team. And we have been in, some of these sites for, the full 8 years. And as we add, hospitals are continuing to renew their partnership with us. We, in 2025, will be launching with 10 new partner sites. Most of this has been funded by grant funds that are allowing us to partner, have hospitals try this service so that they really can understand the value that it brings. The other thing that's important is that we are in multiple different health systems. So that shows our flexibility. All that's required for us to be able to partner is a secure Wi-Fi connection at the hospital. We don't have to integrate with their system. We have a lot of ways that we can work that can assure hospital, IT about our security, privacy, and how we actually conduct our work. One other exciting thing to note is that in 2025, we will be launching 5 hospitals in our second state. So we are just about to move outside Pennsylvania and establish care in a second state. So just to give you a sense of what our impact has been, we have received almost 600 calls to safety. And this is, while it may not seem like a really large number, is impressive because most of the hospitals, if we're focusing on rural and underserved hospitals, some of those may only see 5 cases a year. But one of the metrics that I'll share with you that we have seen is once we launch safety in a community and we message broadly to the community that this resource is available, we see more people coming forward for care. There's a huge amount of stigma and shame related to sexual assault. And we know that only about 20% of people come forward for care. And a lot of that is because they may have experienced harm as they went to tell someone. So it's really important that we establish these safe place hospitals that will allow people to come in and get the care that they need and begin to recover, which down the road should save us a lot of healthcare dollars if people get access to proactive, good mental health care and physical health care after they experience a trauma. So of our 600 calls, some are advice only. That means that they may have been outside a window of evidence collection. There may be other sorts of things related to that. And we help with all of those kinds of questions, the unusual cases that may come in. We've conducted almost 400 telehealth consultations, and about 60% of those consent to participate in our research, which for the patient really means that we want to understand their experience that day in the hospital and their experience of telehealth, as well as try and understand the impact of quality care on their future health and well-being. All of that is optional, but we do have 60% of patients who readily accept that, and we hear from patients that they are so grateful to have a confidential way to share how they were cared for and what their experience was. And I'm going to share some of that data with you. So let me scoot past this. This is just a view of what the telesane may see. So you can see that in real time, they're seeing with tremendous clarity exactly what that local provider is seeing and able to help them through that process. Okay, this just gives you some view. As somebody's conducting a forensic exam, the nurse often has to have both hands on their patient to be able to move tissue, see what they need to see. So we've really created something that obviously runs on an iPhone. But what I want to share with you is that it is custom software. We've locked down this phone. It no longer works like your iPhone. So much so that we have put voice commands on that will allow us, when a nurse needs both their hands to be on the patient, to just say picture, and it will take a picture. Additionally, those photographs never live on the device. They automatically go to secure cloud storage that are the security around that is they're siloed by hospital and by the provider. So we have good password protection on all of this very sensitive data, and have worked really closely with a number of our compliance security partners at Penn State to create something that I truly believe is the best forensic and only kind of focused forensic device in the field. It's very easy to use. We've done lots of work on ease of use so that it's not daunting, and nurses can pick this up and readily step in and do an exam. So I want to share with you some of the data that have come from those that have had the experience of getting safety partnered care in rural and local communities. So 91% of our patients consent to a telehealth exam. So we always get this question, like, do people want this? How acceptable is it to someone to have somebody joining through telehealth? And what we find is that overwhelmingly people are grateful. And what we see from patients and the things that they say are, I can't believe there were 2 nurses who spent this 5 hours and were there to support me the entire time. When we see people decline telehealth, it is typically that they are so overwhelmed and really having an acute mental health crisis. And often the telesane might be there for that moment and say, let's pause, let's make sure that we can get psychiatry and others involved until this person is at a place where they're really ready to proceed. So overwhelmingly, people are very accepting of telehealth and grateful that the local nurse has called a support so that they can get expert care. 93% of patients who have experienced safety telehealth rate their care as excellent or very good. So I'd just love for you to pause and think about the last time that you went to the emergency room, even if it was for a sprained ankle. And I would wonder if you gave that sort of rating for your emergency department visit. To me, this says, it's a long exam, somebody's experienced a lot of trauma, is that we really are delivering something that they need in that moment. So these are very high ratings for an emergency department visit. We also wanted to understand, we know, as I told you, that, only 20% of people who are assaulted come forward for care immediately or within the first 5 days. So we know there are huge barriers that people have to overcome, things that they're worried about, such as worried about being blamed, worried about being judged for the circumstances in which they were sexually assaulted, worried that they might be embarrassed or not have control over what happens once they go to the hospital. So what we have seen is that 66% of our patients, when we ask them, what were you worried about before you came in? 66% they rated at a high level that they had at least one worry, one big concern before they came in to get their sexual assault exam. And then we asked them, now that you've had your exam, did you feel believed? Did you feel shamed or blamed or judged? And we find that of those things, 100% of those concerns were alleviated. Where we still had some that only 88% said their concerns were alleviated is some who said that they still found the exam embarrassing, right? And there's probably some work that we can do there to try and decrease that, but sometimes having a genital exam can just be embarrassing, no matter how carefully we might conduct that and how much we might try and preserve people's dignity and privacy. And then finally, 95% of patients said that they felt better after they had their forensic telehealth examination. And that's the key to everything, is we really want people to feel better and supported, because not only is it about the care that they get in that moment where we can help prevent sexually transmitted infections and look for injury, but it's also that we are having them meet with a local community advocate, somebody who is there purely on their behalf to make sure they understand their rights and can be a support for them as they walk through this entire process. And those individuals often work for an advocacy organization in state college that is center safe, where they can get good mental health services. They can get free consultation with an attorney. So we really want to make sure that they get this warm handoff to community care that will hopefully help them to heal and prevent them coming back to the emergency room for unresolved trauma that might look like suicidal ideation or suicide attempts or unresolved anxiety, because they haven't been able to work through and try and overcome some of the trauma that they've experienced. So patients that do participate in research with us have an opportunity. They answer, 10 short questions while somebody's preparing their discharge paperwork. But they have an opportunity to write in, because what we ask them, how we share our research is, we are trying to provide the very best possible care for people who might experience something like this. So we want to understand if we met your needs today. So we ask them to share whether there are things we could do better, anything that we should know about what their experience was. And these are just some of the quotes that that they have put in. And they are honestly, when they do write in, they're sort of these love letters to their two nurses. Just so incredibly grateful for the support and care that they got in a time that is often the most difficult time of their life. And we see that with, again, when we go back to talking about, well, what is it like to have this technology in the way of patient care, right? First, we have a really experienced, somebody that we've trained, an empathetic and compassionate nurse locally who is there with them. But what's fascinating is to watch patients at the end of the exam, as they're saying goodbye to the telesane, almost going to hug the telehealth cart, right? And that's just shows that if we do this work really well, the technology should fall away. And I think we see that in what patients have stated about their experience. I want to share some workforce outcomes, and because one of my big focus is that I want to make sure that as we build and we train people, we want this to be a big ripple effect. That we know how to do this. We want to start sharing how we do this, and we want to build those resources in communities where they're needed, and we want those resources that are expensive and hard to train to stay. So when we ask nurses locally why they have stuck with this and why they participate with safety, they talk about that they get this comprehensive great training, that they get live exam support. We help train them to be good expert witnesses should they get called into court. And so our outcomes I remember that this is what I talked about was the national average. 2 years after training, SANEs who are still practicing, only 7%. So that is a revolving door of a really critical workforce need that we already don't have enough of. Our rates are 75% after a year of the SANEs that we trained are still in place doing the work in the rural communities and the partnered communities where we're working. I just looked at this the other day, and we are about 55% at year 2. So still just a tremendously substantial advantage over what the national average is. And a lot of that I would attribute to our fantastic telesanes who are they just see themselves as and a lot of them do this work because they want to give back to this next generation of people who will care for this population. And they're checking in with them. How did you do? You did fantastic with the exam, but checking in the next day. How are you doing? That was a difficult exam. So they really are brought into a community where they're supported to do this work and to continue to do the work. When we've asked both nurses and hospital administrators, why did they invest in safety? Why would they continue this partnership? The number one thing is it's better care. This is the care that people deserve in our community. So many are just doing it because it's the right thing to do. We do not currently have regulations and standards to say that everyone in this state, or any other state for that matter, should have access to a SANE as a standard of care. So, absent regulatory and policy pathways that make this something hospitals must do, we're sort of reliant on hospital administrators who just care about this issue and have it maybe in their top 10 lists of things to solve. So where we are partnered really represents where leadership has invested and cares about this issue. But when we dive a little deeper, they also talk about it's much more efficient emergency department flow. There are financial benefits to them having a quality response like this. So instead of taking a physician who may not have this training out of rotation to see a patient that might take 3 to 5 hours to care for, they can have this highly trained nursing workforce, and that physician can see 6 to 8 patients in the time frame in which they might have otherwise been pulled to do a sexual assault exam. And for those people they can see, those are fewer people that sit in the waiting room and fewer people that leave without being seen. So we are working on some cost benefit analysis to really demonstrate where there might be financial value to building in these models. So we have trained, it's actually a little bit more than this now, over 120 new sexual assault nurse examiners in Pennsylvania working in areas where there was either a deficient or no response before we got there. So that represents over 350% increase in the same workforce in those communities. I mentioned before that when we do this sort of public launch, it's critical that we tell this story broadly in these communities, and that we invite the media to do that, to message to people that if you're harmed and you come forward, there is somebody who is well trained, and this hospital has invested in you having this resource, and you will be well cared for. So we have seen that we measure kind of the year before safety gets there. How many patients did you see for this? And we see 167% increase the year after safety is partnered in a community. And that just, sexual assault numbers are not changing, but it does represent that many more people are feeling comfortable in those communities coming forward and getting help. We also look at the impact on the local nurses, because that's a really important part. That's the growing the workforce part. We have 156 local nurses that have been supported by safety. And we ask them after a year to reflect on, how did they feel about providing care before we got there, before we get started, and then how do they feel a year later? And what we see is that they, have a statistically significant increase in their confidence and their ability to be the right response and deliver high quality care. We see that they mention that they feel less anxious. They talk about it feels like I have my best friend in the room with me. It's not so scary. That's again where we lose people, is when the stakes feel really high. They want to do this well, and maybe it doesn't go well. So having a partner restores a lot of that faith in their confidence, as well as decreasing anxiety. A lot of them, we do a lot of work with local hospitals to make sure that they are exalted for being the solution in their community. Some of these hospitals are sending them to national conferences so that they can get more education. So they're really investing in them as a workforce, and we try and facilitate that as well. And then a lot of them just have incredible pride in the response, and there is a lot that we get back from caring for somebody in that moment. And so they're thrilled, as long as they have good support to do the work, to continue to do that. Some of the things after every consultation, we also ask both nurses to reflect on their experience, because it's important to me that we deliver on the safety side a really good partner for that local nurse. So we ask them to reflect, and this is private as well, but they can write in and share their experience, as well as kind of giving us some overall ratings of their experience. But these are some of the things that they've said. The telesame is crucial for the success of this exam. Or someone else who said, I was so thankful to have the telesame there with me. It was a difficult exam, and she was extremely supportive and helped me build confidence throughout my first exam. So just a bit of a review. The goals and the things that we're working on are increasing access We are grateful to be in, our 14 now hospitals and growing. We know this works, but we need to be in many, many more places. So it is really time for us to scale and grow, so that we can have a greater impact. We have great workforce metrics. We are currently funded by HRSA, which is the Human Resource Service Administration, to really kind of grow this workforce. So that's an important part of our work. We have this improved retention, and we are actively working on assessing really quality of care and comparing it to control hospitals that don't have safety. So that's work and research that we're currently conducting. I'm going to talk about this landmark legislation here in the next slide, because this was really important, and an important step. We still have some work to do, but I want to share that with you as well. So in 2020, NBC Nightly News tried to map out where all of the SANE resources might be in the country. If someone was harmed, where could they go across all of the United States? They called us to get data on Pennsylvania. And then they put out their report, and which was, stark, that there are very few places that have comprehensive SANE care. Senator Elder Vogel in Western Pennsylvania, he and his wife were watching that news report, and she said, gosh, do you think this is a problem in Pennsylvania? And he said, I will find out. And thankfully, our media relations people paired him with us, and we worked with his team to really support the legislation he wanted to put forward to make this change. And what he supported was the Pennsylvania Sexual Assault Emergency Services Act. Some of our local partner nurses went to the Capitol with us to speak with him and with others about the bill. It was unanimously passed in both the House and the Senate and signed into law in December of 23. So what the goal of the law is to, if funds are appropriated, so that's the next bit of work that needs to be done, the Department of Health would gain funding to support hospitals to take this up as a service, either telehealth or build their own SANE teams. So really trying to move this toward a standard of care so that every Pennsylvanian, if they were harmed, would have access to an expert when they need one. So this legislation, I think, really gives us an opportunity and can be, kind of a beacon out to the nation of how we might think about funding this sort of program, because we do know that the impact on individuals, on nurses, and the workforce are great. So we have some important next steps, the things that I'm working on all the time, but are really critical and kind of at the front of our mind for moving things forward, is we are really poised and ready for national expansion. We need to think about how to effectively scale this to every community across the United States. It will take time. It takes, resources. We have elements of things that, related to our technology and other things that should move outside of Penn State so that it can be more nimble and responsive beyond a university setting to be able to help people and reach more survivors. We have some really good ideas on how to reach more survivors. That percentage I was telling you about, the 20% who come forward and get care, that means there 80% of people who experience sexual assault are suffering at home alone in silence. And we have some really good ideas about how we might modify and capitalize on the technology we've already developed to meet people at home and give them the resources to answer critical questions that might help allay their fears, point them in the right direction toward expert care, and allow them to, in their own moment at home, as they're processing the trauma they've experienced, on their own schedule, to make the best decisions for themselves and have good advice coming directly to them. So we want to build compassionate, empathic, and thoughtful and accurate AI support that could help give patients and providers access to where the resources are, and really good fact-based information about what their options and choices are. We continue to work with our government relations group about advocating for legislation to make expert sexual assault a standard requirement for hospitals, right? We have lots of hospitals that care about the issue, but almost until there is regulation, not all will put this at the front of their list of all of the challenges that they have to solve. We are building a pediatric team, so that is, I can move that around out of expanding reach and impact, but we are launching that program. I began my work at UC Davis as a pediatric forensic nurse, and I am thrilled now that we're at a place where we can really build out our pediatric team, and we are launching that team in February, so just here in a couple of weeks, and we'll partner with some of our current hospitals to deliver pediatric care. So now we really will be able to provide care across the lifespan, both for sexual assault and for intimate partner violence. So this is, kind of a view into what our pediatric support will be like. Again, some of the numbers I shared with you around where expertise is in Pennsylvania. It's stark for adults and adolescents. It is even more concerning for pediatrics. So this is a very much needed service, and we can then be sure that pediatric patients will get exceptional care where we can offer this. So I welcome you, to both have dialogue with us now. I'm interested in hearing people's thoughts, questions, ideas. And if you have any interest in reaching out to me directly, and would like to have further conversation, I'm certainly open to that as well. So I believe we will share that information later, but it's here on the, you can see our website. You also have access to my email, and I am grateful for your time and attention. So thank you, and I'll turn it back over to Susan.
Thank you, Dr. Miyamoto, for your commitment to this work and your thought-provoking presentation today. We have time for a few questions, and there are a few in the chat box. The first question is, how do you work with law enforcement?
So we make sure that before we go in and launch in any community, that we meet with all of those partners, right? Because we don't want to disrupt any of the processes they have that are highly effective. We only want to build on the strengths they already have. So when we go into a new community, I take time to meet with law enforcement. I meet with the district attorney. I meet with advocates as well. And we just did one of those this morning. So we want to make sure that we're working well with them. We don't directly, in our role as telesanes, meet with law enforcement after they've conducted an exam, but we may uncover some things that are not ideal practices in a community, and then we will convene all of those parties together to help them kind of problem solve and maybe update policies and procedures. So we have great relationships. We also meet with district attorneys in every community where we work once a year to review what were the prosecutorial decisions and what kind of decisions did they make along the way to see if we're having an impact on justice outcomes. So that work is underway. We've been doing that for the last few years, and hope to publish that shortly.
That's a really incredible horizontal approach to resolving the issues surrounding this important topic. Do you have special outreach to hospitals in towns where there are universities?
Yes, we had a Department of Justice grant really looking at SANE services for, individuals that are at that age and in college are at greatest risk of sexual assault. And so we had a grant to help us ensure that there were SANE services in communities where there were universities. So we worked really closely with a number of our Commonwealth campuses as well as others that were around our area to ensure that individuals had SANEs that went out and met with students, explained the process, demystified some of the concerns that students might have about coming forward. And then we work to ensure that those communities always had access to telehealth.
Another question, do you have concerns about grant access with recent federal changes, as well as access to Plan B?
Yes, fantastic question. Yes, I think there are. I have real concerns about grant funding as the sole thing that moves this forward. So that's where I keep talking about we have to move toward policy and regulation change. Only people who come onto a call like this learn and recognize that, wow, maybe I wonder if my hospital has this service. If my sister, if anybody needed this. I've talked to journalists who are shocked and surprised that we don't have this resource everywhere. So I think we need to raise awareness. So regardless of the climate of whether grant funds are available, it's not enough to expect that grant funds alone will sustain this or move this work forward. I think it's the work of states to ensure that everyone has equal access to the quality care they need when they've experienced a trauma. And I think we have to do a lot of advocacy around that. So I do have concerns about that. I also have, some concerns about, we may see a great reduction, in grant availability for this work. And it will be important to figure out, okay, how do we move forward if those things are reduced? The second part of that, access to Plan B, absolutely is a concern for individuals who have experienced something that was not their choice and need to have protections and options. So, again, it's an advocacy issue, and we have a lot of partners that is their primary objective, and we just support the work that they're doing. And yeah, we will partner anywhere despite those challenges and just hope that we continue to give some of the evidence base that shows the impact of people's access and how important that might be in the moment.
With that answer, and you've also touched on your vision for expanding the safety system across the country, how might audience members here today or their networks contribute to helping you and your team to advance that mission?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. We have a couple of things that are really important for us right now. I've had to learn a lot about, if we want these things to succeed, they have to be sustainable. So I've really had an eye to sustainability from the outset. And I actually see Dr. Melendez Nuzo, my original dean here at Penn State, who helped me to meet some business partners in the area. So I've had a really strong business advisory board, and we are actively thinking about how will we move something that is for societal good out into, a commercialized entity that will give us flexibility to serve people wherever they're needed. The challenge is that this is not going to be an invention or a business that yields, a lot of income, right? It is societal good, and we are, right now we are highly dependent on grants, but we need to move away from that to be able to be flexible and then build capacity. And the more hospitals that we can add on, and the more that we can demonstrate the real value to individuals, hospitals, communities, we'll have greater success. So right now, I think we need some of those resources to kind of duplicate some of the things that we do at Penn State and begin to see how they might thrive in a business. So we need some business level help and investment to be able to have that runway, a little longer financial runway to kick those things off. I mentioned, sort of the next level beyond this service that we deliver, I think is really transitioning and amplifying some of the things that we've built to impact people at home, giving them resources, working on some of that AI driven response at home. We had actually reached out when we all started seeing things in the news around rape as a war crime, given all of the conflict in the world. We had offered to send our devices because people may be in a place where they could record their memory, document what their experience was, even though they may not be able to act on it or access care right now, and do that in a secure way that becomes a vault. And so we have some really good ideas for how to move that forward and be able to be not only in rural and underserved communities here, but really impact people in remote locations around the world.
We've actually just now touched on part of an answer to another question. You have obviously advanced, technology around telehealth solutions. Do you see other areas of forensic medicine that the safety system could be adapted or modified for?
Absolutely. We haven't done a lot of, discovery in that area about what the utility might be, but I could see for those who are going out in the field, one of the benefits of what we've created is it's the device that's in the palm of your hand, right? We lock it down. You can't just add it to your phone, but it does make it highly mobile. And we've talked to government entities and others who are also looking for things like this. And the flexibility that we've created in how we built it was very intentional so that it didn't require a lot of network activity. It really just requires a Wi-Fi password to be able to be effective. So we built that intentionally so that it could be used wherever it's needed.
Well, one final question before we need to sign off is how do you recruit your nurse examiners?
Oh, it's a challenge. When I was telling you that there are very few nurses who are SANE trained, the number then that meet my criteria for what qualifies them as an expert SANE, which is that they have to pass a certification exam after 2 years of practice. They have to have practiced for at least 3 years and see a large number of survivors themselves. That pool is very small. So there are about under 3,000 SANEs across the country that just have SANE training. So the number who are certified is even smaller. So we do a lot of recruitment through the International Association of Forensic Nurses, which is the certifying body. Once we find great telesanes, that's what we call them, we ask them who their friends are. And I think the other thing that, when we think about resources that are needed, it's really time for us to build a telesane training academy because there aren't enough. And I really think we've had great success in training people how to be that supportive partner through telehealth. But that requires that somebody is a good mentor, the different set of skills than just being a good nurse. And so I think, it's really time for us to build some telesane training academies, potentially in different areas of the country, to gain greater access to and build that workforce further. Great question.
Well, this has been a wonderful conversation and presentation, and your passion for all of this work, really comes through so clearly. I want to thank you for your time today, Dr. Miyamoto. It's been really an excellent presentation. If you have a question that we didn't have time to address here today, someone from the volunteer programs team will reach out and follow up with you. If you'd like to view this presentation again or share it with others, a video recording of the event will be sent out to all the invitees, and the recordings of all our Noontime Knowledge series events are available on the Penn State YouTube channel. Thank you again, Sheridan, for being here today to educate us about this important issue, and a big thank you to our attendees for being with us today for the first Noontime Knowledge of 2025. If anyone here or anyone in your networks would be interested in having a conversation about how philanthropy could support the aims of the safety system, I'd be happy to begin those conversations with you or others. My contact information is on the screen right now. Please note that the Noontime Knowledge series will be back in March with a session called Nourishing Learning at the Keiko Miwa Ross Student Farm. This officially concludes our event for today. Stay warm and well, everyone.